Welcome back, everyone. I'm Max.
And I'm Luke.
And welcome back to another podcast. Here we are with the Viva Mexico 250 at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. It's a road course in Mexico. It's the first time NASCAR is going to this track, so I think we're going to be in for a good one here today. Luke, I'll let you kick us off with qualifying.
Yeah, and our first time at this track, so who else but SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen, the road course ringer from New Zealand, getting the pole. No surprise at all there. And Ryan Preece qualifying in second, a bit of a surprise there, but he was great in practice, and that speed transferred through very well for qualifying. And then, Ty Gibbs and Michael McDowell, two guys that are very good at road courses in this next-gen car, qualifying in fourth and fifth. So not a lot of surprises up here in the top five.
Yeah, for sure, especially mentioned no surprises. The guy starting first, Shane Van Gisbergen, you already touched on it a little bit, but with it being NASCAR's first race ever here, he has that advantage as he has just as much experience on this track that everyone else in the field does, except Daniel Suarez, who I believe I mentioned in last week's podcast that he has a little experience in NASCAR Mexico Series, and he did run the Xfinity Series race the day before. But Shane Van Gisbergen, he's in a very similar situation here than he was at with the first Chicago street race. And as we know, he would go on to win that race fairly easily after starting mid-pack in his first NASCAR start. But to see him on the pole, it's not a surprise at all. And, he was me and Zach's pick to win the race. And I think it's going to hold true here with his qualifying effort.
Yeah, for sure. Just going down a little bit further in the list, AJ Allmendinger, another road course ringer in eighth. Chase Elliott in 12th, looking for his eighth and road course win in the NASCAR Cup Series. Daniel Suarez, who won the Xfinity race, like you mentioned, the day before, he qualifies in 10th. So very good pace for the Cup car. We got Josh Berry in 13th with another great qualifying effort. And then Riley Herbst in 15th, one of his best qualifying efforts of the season. So hopefully that speed can transfer through for that 35 team.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned Daniel Suarez winning the Xfinity Series race, and he didn't start first or even in the top 10. He started dead last in 36th. So to see him go on to win that Xfinity race with basically no struggle at all, as he won it by, I believe, over a second over Taylor Gray. But, he's the only one with experience on this track, and you would think it's going to show, and that he will definitely be one of the drivers contending for the win in this Mexico Series race. But looking a little further down the leaderboard, starting 19th, I do want to touch on Chase Briscoe. He did have pole 3 weeks in a row, and this is the first week that actually of the month of June that he doesn't have a pole yet. So to see him all the way back in 19th, I'm not really too concerned. I think the speed is still in the car. It's a road course, so it's not exactly Briscoe's cup of tea. But I think he will still be able to manage, maybe finish around there. Really all he's trying to do is see if he can maybe get a top 16 finish, because if he's finishing top 16, he's making up ground on the playoff bubble. So, that's all you really have to do if you're Chase Briscoe.
Yeah, for sure. Just going down here, we got Tyler Reddick in 22nd. And, a poor qualifying effort for a guy who's been so dominant at road courses, like I mentioned in the next-gen car. Same with Michael McDowell. So, not a lot of speed out of the 23XI guys. Riley Herbst being the best qualifier there, which is a bit abnormal. But Hocevar in 23rd, one of his not so good qualifying efforts here. But he did mention how he doesn't like this track too much, and it was very hard on him. The day before in qualifying. But William Byron 27th, so another guy that just didn't have the pace really. Alex Bowman 29th, another guy, and Christopher Bell in 31st with his worst qualifying effort when he didn't crash. So a bit abnormal here in the bottom 20s, but everything up front looks a-okay in qualifying.
Yeah, there's one more name I want to mention. It's the guy starting 36th. That's the Joe Gibbs racing number 11 of Ryan Truex. So Denny Hamlin isn't racing this week. He's at home with his fiance Jordan. They just had their third kid. So congrats to Denny, and glad everything goes well with that, and he enjoys his break. But it will be Ryan Truex, the younger brother of Martin Truex Jr., who used to drive Briscoe's 19 car, filling in for Denny Hamlin. So it'll be interesting to see the run he puts up today, as this is his first NASCAR Cup Series start.
Yeah, for sure. But, with that being said, that's pretty much it for qualifying. So we're going to jump right into the race here. And as we mentioned, SVG and Ryan Preece on the front row off the restart. And as quickly as we would get going here, the rain would show itself in Mexico, and we would go under caution for it. As, everyone would be getting ready to put those wet weather tires on, take the slicks off. And if I'm NASCAR, I don't know if nobody had a radar around or what's going on, but no team really knew that the rain was going to come this quickly. But I feel like NASCAR should have, said that, hey, we got inclement weather coming and, get ready to put the wet weather tires on. But every car was out here with slicks, so they had to put the caution out, as someone would have probably looked like a bowling ball in turn one with the rain. So just an interesting caution for rain here.
Yeah, and you mentioned, did they not know the rain was coming? But I'm actually going to defend NASCAR here. And what I did hear on social media and stuff is that with the altitude and up in the mountains that this road course is at in Mexico City, it's at almost 8,000 feet above sea level, that the radar can be a bit spotty and it's quite often wrong based on the elevation. Which was kind of interesting to know. So it was they knew there was inclement weather in the area, but they didn't know where it really was and when it was going to be hitting. So we know it was kind of going to be on and off all race. So it really makes an interesting strategy race for the teams. Where's the speed going to be? Is more of the track going to be dry, wet? Or the wet weather is going to be faster? Or are they going to overheat because the track isn't wet enough? Or are the slick's going to be too slick and you're going to slide around too much and lose too much time? So, it kind of gave us that happy medium. I almost, in my opinion, I think made the race more entertaining, especially from the start.
Yeah, but going off the restart here, NASCAR gave the option for the drivers and teams to put on wet weather tires. They didn't have to. That's where we see, Chris Buescher and Cindric, stay out to keep the slicks on. So, most people would go for the wet weather tires, and that's certainly what I would have done with how much rain was coming down on this track. And with it being an F1 course, it is a little bit difficult for these stock cars to get around. But, I was interested to see how the call would work for Buescher and Cindric and a few others.
Yeah, and it's not going to work so well for Chris Buescher. He's going to lose a lot of spots right off the gun, as we're going to see. But Austin Cindric, it's actually going to end up holding up pretty well, and until the sky will eventually end up clearing up and force everyone to slicks for a little while, we're going to see. It's going to keep Austin Cindric in the mix, so he is going to do a great job, and I wanted to kind of say that in advance that, he definitely deserves a little bit of praise for how he was wheeling this thing on slicks on a wet F1 track that NASCAR has never seen before.
Yeah, and, as this run goes on, we'd see kind of our first wreck at this track as Kyle Busch, locks up the tires and misses braking zone and goes flying through, the turn, and then Zane Smith just follows him. So, you take out Justin Haley with the biggest damage as his back bumper was crushed. Kyle Larson had a big wheelbase issue as that was bouncing around as he was sliding through, off the track, and Chase Briscoe would get up involved in it, but wouldn't have too much damage. So it's a wreck that I was expecting to see. And, you could say it was Kyle Busch's fault, but with the rain and them never even going here, like you mentioned, with the F1 tracks, it's a little bit tougher. And, Zane Smith, I think he was kind of using Kyle Busch as a little bit of a braking zone aid, and he would follow him with, so it would just add to the destruction here for our first real caution of the day.
Yeah, you mentioned this crash being expected, and well, with this weather, you mentioned everything of why it would be expected, and you're absolutely right. But what exactly wasn't what I didn't expect was that the crash would be coming from someone that was on wet weathers, not slicks. A car that I would have expected to make this mistake, I thought it would have either been, Cindric or Buescher, just hitting the brakes, locking up the tires, and basically just sliding off the racetrack. So, but to see it, that really this was just Kyle Buescher trying to get too much. He took accountability for it. He knew it was his fault. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Zane Smith basically just followed him in, using him as the marker of where to brake. So it's nothing really super crazy, but it definitely was hard contact for Kyle Busch, Allmendinger, Justin Haley and Kyle Larson, but Briscoe would just go for a spin and would manage to stay in the race.
Yeah, and as this caution would come out, it would give an opportunity for Chris Buescher, who was on slicks, to put those weather tires on the pit stop. And as he was running in the back 30s, so it's interesting. It worked out for Cindric and not Buescher. I'm not really sure why. Maybe Cindric just had better track position and was able to kind of run with it. But as we go into the restart, we see Ty Gibbs and SVG still on the front row heading into turn 1 here on lap 10.
Yeah, and Ty Gibbs is going to be able to maintain this lead for only about 2 corners until SVG says, "Sorry, bud, but this is my race. I'm going to win this week." It's as simple as that. But no sooner do we see SVG get to the lead, Noah Gragson is off track from 24th, and this is just basically a tire lockup. We're going to see this a bunch of times today. This is the second road course we've covered, and it's our first inclement weather road course. So missing turns or sliding off track is very common for a NASCAR road course in bad weather. So no surprise to me here. And we're also going to see John Hunter Nemechek spin in turn 9 a little after the Gregson spin, and he's going to be able to continue as well, and the race will stay green, which is something else we'll notice with road courses. Spins don't always bring out the caution unless they can't get the car refired and they're sitting in the middle of the track, or NASCAR feels that they're in a position that could be dangerous for oncoming traffic.
Yeah, and as all that stuff is going on behind him, SVG would extend his lead over Gibbs to 4.3 seconds. And as soon as I saw this watching at home, I pretty much knew he had the win locked up. I mean, I've never seen someone drive a stock car on road courses quite like SVG. Rain or sun, I mean, the guy was just wheeling the car faster than everyone else. So, and it's no shame to Ty Gibbs. He's an excellent road course driver, but when you're going up against a supercar champion, 4.3 seconds is respectable. But, as quick as this, lead was extended for SVG, well, the sun would kind of peak out and everyone would come in, SVG and Ty Dillon would be the first two to come in for put those slicks right back on. So, just as I mentioned, Buescher coming in to put back on the wets, well, he would, obviously have to come back in to put on the dries as the rain would clear up and we would have some sunshine at Mexico.
Yeah, the weather finally able to clear up, and this is kind of that other side of this race that we will also see throughout this day as it kind of goes back and forth multiple times throughout the day. But those cars that do come down for the dries before the end of the stage, as it only is a 20-lap first stage. This is around lap 18 that we're seeing these pit stops wrap up because you can't pit with less than 2 laps in the stage. Well, we are going to see Ryan Preece, who started this race second. He's going to stay out on the wet weathers to make sure he gets the stage win, as points are absolutely crucial for him, right on the bubble. So I think this is, even though he really does need a win, and a win would be huge for the RFK 60 car of Ryan Preece, the stage points might be bigger, and he also does get that playoff point if he would be there at the end of the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned points being huge for Preece as he is a little bit outside that playoff bubble, and I love this call. SVG went in because he knew he had the speed to go out and win this race, and Preece decided to stay out to get the 10 stage points and 1 playoff point. So, a mix in strategy, but I think Preece is going to need a win to get into the playoffs, and certainly this playoff point and these 10 extra stage points helps at a ton. But followed by him, we see Ryan Blaney in second, Chad Chastain third, Michael McDowell and Todd Gilliland rounding out the top 5. So, 3 guys we didn't mention at all on this stage, but Michael McDowell and Todd Gilliland, huge points there in the stage, finishing 4th and 5th. So that would definitely help them out in the playoff standings.
Yeah, and you mentioned Todd Gilliland. He's one of those cars that was all the way in the back when cars started pitting to change to the dry tires around lap 18, and he would stay out and would be able to get the top 5. So it's just a huge finish to the stage for him, and to be able to get those 5 stage points.
Yeah, for sure. Just want to touch on, all the lead lap cars that came in. So just want to touch on that again, that they would switch back over those slicks to get a little bit of faster racing going on here and switch out those wet weather tires. But, we would have a few guys stay on the wet weather tires, that being McDowell, Hocevar, Suarez, and Stenhouse. So, it's again a mix and strategy, as the track was still a little bit wet. So, these teams and these drivers wanted to stay on those wet weather tires for more grip, less speed. But, at this track, I like that call too, because especially with the long turn one and the chicanes and the S's, things get a little bit loose in some of these corners. So the wet weather tire is a good call as well.
Yeah, it was kind of a tough decision, with really having nothing to base off of for this course, knowing if rather the dries or the wet weathers, if one of them is going to be a definite right decision, it's really tough to say. So the fact that there were only 4 cars on the wet weather tires to start stage 2 is kind of surprising to me. I thought it would have been a little bit more of a split decision, but as we will end up seeing that the switching to slicks will be the right decision, as there was another storm moving in towards the end of stage 2, but the slicks would hold on until a pit stop was required. And that would be around when the storm would approach, putting the cars back onto wet weather tires. But I don't mean to get ahead in the race, and skipping ahead one lap before we would go green for stage 2, we're going to see Briscoe penalized a lap for fueling twice as the free pass car. And man, you hate it for Chase Briscoe. Like, this guy, he has the speed, and you mentioned if it's a driver error or what it is, you lean more the direction of driver error, but this isn't on Chase. This is a pit crew mistake. So there's just a lot of messy stuff that this 19 team needs to clean up as a whole.
Yeah, and they, as I keep mentioning it, you got to control what you can control. So the driver has to control what he control. Pit crew, same thing. Crew chief, spotter, and when one person messes up, the whole team does. So it's something that Briscoe can't afford to keep doing, and it's not his fault. It was obviously on the pit crew here. Just a mistake, and with where he is when he does, he doesn't have a win. He's required on these points and leaning heavily to get these good finishes. Stuff like this just can't happen, and it would definitely hurt him. As he would get this penalty.
Yeah, for sure. But not to linger on Chase Briscoe, we move to the restart about a lap later, and we're going to see McDowell, Hocevar, 2 Spire cars leading us to green for stage 2. And McDowell's going to clear for the lead, but Suarez is going to get around Hocevar, and the crowd is absolutely going to roar as they approach the stadium section of this road course, which is a really awesome experience here. This is about 3 turns towards the end of the lap where we see there's basically a stadium around these turns where a bunch of fans can sit and get a great perspective of kind of the race almost to the line. It's like the last 3 or 4 corners, as I said before, but a really cool aspect that NASCAR has never really seen before. And Daniel Suarez is actually going to get the lead prior to that and then be overtaken again by McDowell through that section. So just couldn't hold on to get the hometown roars, as this is kind of his hometown race.
Yeah, and the stadium section is super cool for anyone that didn't get to see it. And just a cool battle here for first, second, and third, as we see SVG challenging for second off the final stadium turn. But here we see John Nemechek, just his experience as simple as been in turn 3, and you mentioned NASCAR being very light on the caution button for this race because of it being a road course, and with these single car spins, not wanting to waste too much time with having to get everyone under caution and doing the caution laps. So he would manage to get his car refired up without a caution. So good job on him to not take anyone out or bring out the caution for anyone running up in the lead. But just as quickly as he would direct, we see Todd Gilliland, who was having an amazing stage 1 spin from 17th. And it's just the same thing. It's a single car wreck, track limits being as tight as they are here. And it with being kind of a similar layout style to COTA, with a lot of track limits being an F1 course. So it's just simple stuff, but stuff that can definitely hurt your day.
Yeah, it's not like, he has the contact here with Tyler Reddick. It's not like Reddick was wrecking him intentionally. It's just 2 guys still figuring out this race. We're only, even with practice and qualifying included and the laps running the race, these guys have only run 45, 50 laps on this track in their life. So it clearly wasn't intentional by Reddick. I'm not going to throw blame on anyone here, as it's not like NASCAR's been racing here for 30, 40 years. So as I said earlier, there's nothing to base off of, and it's kind of just two cars going for the same real estate, trying to figure out what lane works best.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. Don't want to pin the blame on Reddick at all here. But, as these cars were kind of spacing out, we'd see Daniel Suarez and Michael McDowell, who I mentioned were on those wet weather tires. They would strategically pit from 6th and 7th to get back on those dry tires. That's the rain that was kind of supposedly coming in. It was spotty. Nothing ever came of it. So they would, make that call to go back on the dry tires. And same with Ricky Stenhouse, who I mentioned, who was running in 10th. So, he mentioned he qualified poorly, and here he is up there in the top 10 running super well. So, you can definitely see the guys that were on these wet weather tires were running well. And that's why I mentioned that I like the strategy call from these teams.
Yeah, for sure. But, it does cause that extra pit stop, and with the weather not coming in as expected, it kind of did screw these guys quite a bit and make their job for the second half of this race a lot more difficult, as I don't know if I didn't catch it, but if you also mentioned Hocevar would also pit, because he would be the last to pit with the wet weathers, and it's just kind of, you got to take risks, when you're running in the back, and this one just didn't pan out for these guys. But it will not be the last that we will see of Michael McDowell. Towards the end of this race, we will see him again. So it does go to show you that even though these cars were on a different tire strategy, some of these cars still did have speed and were able to compete for a top 5, top 10.
Yeah, for sure. And, just as we're seeing these guys come in for pit stops, we see Ryan Truex spin in the mid-pack in turn 9, and this would bring out the caution, as, he would struggle to get that thing refired up. And NASCAR determined he was in a dangerous position there with that turn 9 being as tight as it is. So we'd see, kind of the second real caution of the day here at Mexico.
Yeah, and there's nothing a whole lot to elaborate on here. We've basically mentioned all the reasons for spins already at Mexico City. The inexperience is one of the biggest parts, and just drivers going for the same real estate. There's nothing really intentional to blame on anyone, and Truex just wasn't able to get this refired, so it would end up bringing out that caution. But we're not going to waste no time on the pit stops that did happen, as it will really not cause anything to change during that caution. And it's going to bring us back to the actual leaders of this race of Ty Gibbs and Shane Van Gisbergen, leading us back to green.
Yeah, and just as they would lead us back to green, going into the first 3 turns, we see Joey Logano in 10th. He would just completely miss turn 4, and he was struggling all day running, 20th on back, and his car was just not handling well with this inclement weather and this tight track. So, I know he does have his playoffs, locked up and everything, but, kind of an abnormal running for Logano. But, this wouldn't bring out the caution, but, he just completely missed that turn 4.
Yeah, sure. And it'll lead us back to the battle for the lead, which is Ty Gibbs managing to keep the lead for 3 laps at this point. You're like, wow, this is amazing. He's holding off SVG. There's not many guys that can do that. So that really goes to show you that Ty Gibbs, a guy that's never won in his career, he has a lot of speed. And when he's on the same playing surface as everyone else and has just as much experience as everyone does, he's in it for the win. So it's great to see all the speed out of that 54 car. But a lap after, we see Ty Gibbs continue to extend his lead over SVG. Eric Jones is going to be forced to pit with a flat left front tire while running 22nd. We didn't get a whole lot of information on the reason for this tire blowing, I was a little confused by it. If you have any reasoning for why this tire may have blown, go ahead.
Yeah, it kind of looked like to me in one of the replays he just exceeded the track limits and kind of ran over the one bump, and it would kind of get his car almost airborne, and it was just kind of caused that left front tire to go flat. Something I haven't really seen all day, as there aren't track limits at every single turn, so I'm not sure what turn it happened in. I don't have that information, but it kind of looked like he just exceeded the track limits, and the tire was not having it as it would explode pretty much, and causing him to have to come and do a pit stop in 22nd place. So that's all I have pretty much with it. Wish I had more information as what turn it was.
Right. It's a great explanation, but we will be able to stay green as the carcass would stay on Eric Jones's race car. And about a lap later, yet again, we're going to see Ty Dillon get moved out of the way by Ryan Blaney. And just as Ryan Blaney moves out of the way, Chase Elliott's going to follow Blaney through and door slam Ty Dillon as well. And it's in that same corner where we saw Reddick get into Todd Gilliland. So this corner has been really chaotic, and I kind of loved this corner all day. It was a great passing zone, and if you wanted to pass people there, you kind of had to move them, almost like a Martinsville. So it was a really exciting corner to watch.
Yeah, and this is just straight up Ryan Blanding and Elliott saying, just get out of the way at this point. You mentioned how hard it is at turn 4 to pass, and you see Joey Logano going off in turn 4, like I mentioned. So Ryan Blaney and Elliott weren't going to take the risk with Ty Dillon, who is in a slower car than they are, and they just decided to just body him and door slam out of the way. And respect to him, but getting back into the action here, we'd see Cindric and Ty Dillon, Keselowski, they would make the pit stops how they were coming for fuel. And then we'd see Byron, Elliott, Bubba, Barry, Logano, Reddick, Gregson. So the entire field is going to have to come in here for more service. We see Gibbs pit from the lead, and then SVG would stay out to try to run a few more laps to get to the end of the stage, which he would be able to do. And SVG would win stage 2, followed by Bell, Bowman, Blaney, and Michael McDowell with another top 5 finish in the stage in a day where points are a must for him. So a great job for that 71 Spire team.
Right. You mentioned McDowell being the big points getter today, but there's someone else in that top 5 of stage 2 that is a great name to hear, and it's music to basically any NASCAR fan's ears to hear this name in the top 5, and it's the guy finishing third. It's Alex Bowman. This guy has gone through it the last few weeks. He's had horrible hits, as he did at Michigan, which was just the previous week. So to see him in this race car is just absolutely phenomenal. And not only in the race car and running in the back, he's running towards the front and getting a bunch of stage points. As here he would get 8 stage points for finishing stage 2 and third. So for another car that's right around the bubble and is going to be there come the end of the season, more huge points.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't really touched on his name in stages a lot this season in the podcast that we've done. So, I kind of think that this was a track that he was going to excel at because of the Chicago Street Course last year, which he won. He's kind of becoming a great road course driver. So I guess my prediction was kind of right that he was going to be doing this well at this racetrack, which is just good to see because Alex Bowman in the playoffs is always fun to watch. But getting back into the stage 3 action, we see everyone that we didn't pit would come in, and then we see SVG, lead with Christopher Bell on his outside, and this is going to be interesting to talk about because these two guys are going to be brought up a lot in stage 3.
Yeah, it's just going to be a battle. It's going to be Gibbs passing SVG, SVG passing Gibbs. So, we're going to be in for some good racing as it's the 2 fastest cars all day right at the front. So, moving on and allowing us to get into the restart, we're going to see Michael McDowell miss turn 2 right off the restart. And he's going to go into the lead, but to make sure he doesn't get penalized by NASCAR, he's actually going to brake, give the spots back, which is a really, really smart veteran move by Michael McDowell, where he can kind of keep his track position in the top 5, top 10 by giving the spots for the lead back in the top 3 instead of NASCAR making him basically do a pass through down pit road where he would lose almost every spot. So as I said before, a great veteran move there by Michael McDowell.
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff there. And it just sucks because he was running so, so high up in positions. But we also see Ricky Stenhouse in turn 15, which was another trouble corner. In 24th, he would spin out, but he would manage to get that thing refired up. And NASCAR would not throw the caution. But here's where we see SVG pass Christopher Bell for the lead in turn 12. And if you're Christopher Bell, you got to do everything in your power to keep SVG behind you. Because once SVG gets out into a lead at a road course, it's almost near impossible to try to catch back up to him. So Bell did everything he could, and with turn 12, I think being in the stadium course, It is a passing corner, so SVG would pounce on that opportunity to pass him for the lead.
Yeah, and continue to move on a little deeper in the stage 3 run. We're going to see Hocevar miss turn 4 yet again. He's a lap down at this point. Ryan Trix is going to spin again in the S's from 24th, but he's going to be able to get it refired. So no caution there, and we're going to as well see Ryan Preece miss turn 11 about 2 laps later and brush the wall, but he will continue as well, keeping the race green. And I'm going to hand it back over to you because we had a long green flag run here, and SVG, who was out in the lead, he's out to almost a 5-second lead at this point over Christopher Bell.
Yeah, and, the only good thing left is that they all have to come in for a pit stop soon, so that could potentially shake up everything, but just so dominant. I mean, like I said earlier, SVG, once he gets out to a lead at a road course, it's nearly impossible to try to catch back up to him, so... we would see Alex Bowman, Busher, and Priest, guys who've been running up there all day. They would make their final pit stops of the day, running all up in the top 10 here for some tires and some adjustments with some fuel as well. And then, a lap later, we would see SVG, come in to the pits with Custer, Herbst, and Chastain, who will follow them in. And then we'd see Ty Gibbs take over the lead here.
Yeah, there was one thing during that green flag pit cycle that I did want to mention that was kind of really important for this driver in particular and really sucked for this driver, but it was Ryan Preece. He would be penalized for driving through too many pit boxes on entry into his own pit box. So such a shame for him. I mentioned right on the bubble, he won stage 1, got all the stage points he needed there, but you're going to need more than that. And you can't fall below this bubble as more drivers. We've kind of hinted to it many times already, but another new driver is going to win in SVG. So that bubble is going to get tougher and tighter.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's just a mistake that can happen. And, with his pit box being in the front 2 boxes, it's kind of hard to drive through too many pit boxes, but unfortunately he would manage to do so as, tensions are rising and, it's getting more, adamant that he needs to have a good run. So it's just unfortunate. And, I like Ryan Preece a lot, and, hopefully he can rewrite this wrong and, maybe go out there and win at somewhere to lock himself in for RFK. But, Bell would also come in from second position. I forgot to mention that earlier. But, while these guys are kind of making their pit stops and Gibbs, who was in the lead, who's, trying to hold out, as long as he can, who's led a ton of laps today, and doing a really good job just keeping that car up there in the top 5. We would see a caution come out, unfortunately, and that's just the last thing that Ty Gibbs would want to see here. Yeah,
definitely, and it's Carson Hocevar bringing out the caution. It's just been a day from hell for Carson Hocevar. He's already a lap down at this point. This spin is from 26th, so he's just going to fall to the back of all the cars that are 1 lap down. So, hey, he needs some good runs coming up here, and he's kind of out of the points conversation now as we're coming down to the nitty gritty towards the end of this regular season before we get to the playoffs. And that's a car that is going to need a win. And we've seen in previous weeks that he has the speed to win, and he's going to need to get it done sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. But he does need to start, picking back up with these good finishes. As he mentioned, he is kind of falling outside that playoff bubble. But during this pits or caution cycle, we'd see Zane Smith get the free pass under caution. Then, while these pit stops are unfolding, we'd see SVG report to a potential loose wheel. He thought maybe that the lug nut wasn't secure on one of the tires, but his crew would confirm. So something to just look out for, as this could potentially cost him some positions or some speed in the race. So I was definitely keeping my eye out for SVG out there coming on this restart here.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and that he had concern for how his race car was going to drive, but his team said everything looks good. Everything on SMT is showing up good. So SVG said over the radio, he goes, "I trust you guys." And instead of taking it kind of nice and slow and making sure the tire doesn't fall off, he does race hard, trusts his team, and the tire is going to stay good. So that's some really kind of wholesome news you see there between SVG and his team, to know that there's a good, trustworthy relationship between everyone there.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that, radio sequence where he's like, I trust you guys. And that's what you really need when you've been running where you're running this season and an opportunity comes up to lock yourself into the playoffs at a road course. You just got to have full trust in your team and your driver, and everything's going to play out right. But, on the restart, we'd see, SVG stay out there as he trusted his team with Bell. But SVG would just clear right away in turn one, and then Bowman would get Bell for second. But, just as we start here on the restart, we see Ryan Truex, who has had a number of incidents this race. He would spin sideways and kind of get caught on the front nose of McDowell, and then William Byron would hit his front left tire and kind of straighten him out. But, just a tough kind of day for Ryan Truex, who was filling in for Denny Hamlin, like you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah, this is a really kind of funny situation to me. It almost looked fake. Ryan Truex was literally perpendicular to the front bumper of Michael McDowell. And what I mean by that is that McDowell was driving this way and Truex's car was that way. So they basically had a T formation through turns 2 and 3. But as you mentioned, William Byron would help Ryan Truex manage to get straightened out, and everyone would go on to continue. But no later than that, we see Briscoe, who's having a rough day as well, very similar to Hocevar. He's going to hit the tire barrier in turn 2 from just out or around the top 10, and he's going to be able to continue as well. And we're going to see Catherine Legg spin in turns 5 and 6 as well and be able to keep going.
Yeah, and, just as we're talking about these spins, I'll just add a few more. We got Austin Dillon in 19th spinning after contact with Logano in turn 12. I feel like I've said Logano's name like 4 or 5 times during these spins that we're talking about, but Josh Berry would kind of get caught up in it. But no caution would come of it. They'd get back going here, so kind of the norm as we're saying these spins. But, I'll just add another one here. Riley Herbst, more contact with William Byron in turn 11, he would spin. And then I nearly had a heart attack watching this on TV. Herbst, I don't know what happened, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who was in turn 10, he would make the turn to turn 11, and Riley Herbst would just floor it out in front of him as Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would be going full speed, and nearly Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would just pile drive Herbst in the door. So this is one where I was like, maybe throw out the caution, but I understand why they didn't. And, I don't know if Herbst didn't get anything from his spotter to saying a car was coming, but just a scary, scary almost accident we had here at Mexico.
Yeah, you would think that Riley Herbst's spotter would tell him that there is a car coming, and I think that's just a mistake there. And I'm going to add another mistake, and this isn't a mistake by the 35 team. I think this is a mistake by NASCAR. This is a blind corner, and you have a car facing the racing lane that his only way to get recorrected is to hit the gas into the racing lane. So I absolutely think NASCAR should have thrown the caution here. I think it was extremely dangerous, and it almost resulted in a really bad crash. And Stenhouse, he was kind of on his toes, was able to hit his brakes, and we say NASCAR it's a sport of inches with close finishes and everything, but here NASCAR was a sport of inches in a very different way of what could have been a really nasty wreck. Yeah,
for sure. I 100% agree that they should have thrown it out there. You mentioned it being a blind corner. I think it's a perfect way of explaining it. So just thankful that everyone's all right and no one got into contact there, because that could have been bad. But moving back into the racing up front, we see Alex Bowman and Bell, who I was mentioning, cleared for second. They would continue battling for that second place position, and that would only make SVG extend his lead further to nearly 2 seconds over these guys. So, kind of at this point, as we only have about 25 laps to go, SVG knew that this was his chance to pull away, and then he would do so very nicely.
Yeah, it's another pass by SVG. It makes him look so easy, at a road course where there's some of the hardest tracks to pass on, and he makes it look like oval passes with how he just drives right around people and makes NASCAR drivers look like they're not even professional. So just the pure skill and just experience from SVG just continues to shine in this race.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned it, making it look like they have no idea what they're doing out there, but that's just how it is when you get a guy who's a 3-time supercar champion come over to the stock cars. So, But, we see Chase Elliott, and he'd make a pass on Cole Custer for fifth, and, you might be wondering why I'm mentioning this, but Cole Custer, who hasn't got a top 5 finish or barely run in the top 10 all season, he's here in fifth at a road course, running top 5 and running next to Chase Elliott, who's arguably one of the best road course drivers of all time. So just good stuff from Haas factory team, who's had a nightmarish season. But just wanted to touch on that because running in the top 5 for a team like that is just something to note. So
you're absolutely right. And I kind of think when I think of Cole Custer at road courses, I think of one thing, and it's not a very good experience. It's a few years back at the debut race at Circuit of the Americas in the rain race, where Martin Truex Jr. was slow in front of him, and Cole Custer basically would just throttle him, go right under him, submarine style, and they would go head on into an Armco barrier, both catching on fire. And luckily the rain would put it out, but a really scary crash there. And here he is at a different road course running super well. So it's a really nice job by Custer to kind of redeem his road course identity.
Oh, 100%. But, SVG would, extend his lead over Alex Bowman, who would finally clear Bell for second to almost 1.7 seconds. But just as Bowman clears for second, Bell would, stay on him and try to make some passes in turn 1 and 3, which are very effective passing zones for that 20 team, which we've seen all day on restarts. But he was unable to complete the overtake. And here's a big point of the podcast, which we're going to touch on a lot. Hocevar and Stenhouse. You remember those names from in Nashville, which we did a couple of days ago. Hocevar lock up the brakes and just plow Stenhouse and just take him out in the stadium section. No caution would come of it, but with where they're running and with what happened and all the tension, this is just adding fuel to the fire. So I'll let you give your 2 cents on this as you are a Ricky fan, but just a bad mistake from Hocevar here.
Yeah, I saw this, and as soon as I saw this, I had the same reaction all the announcers did. I was thinking, oh boy, this is going to be bad for Hocevar. Ricky gave him a chance after Nashville, and here he is again. And not only is he not racing him for a position, Hocevar is a lap down here, and Ricky is fighting to have a great day. He's running inside the top 15. And Hocevar just drives right through the back of him, and that was going to be the final fuse for Ricky. So we will end up getting into what will happen with the two of these after the race. So we'll make sure to touch on it when we get to the end of the race. But you knew Hocevar was going to be in trouble when both these cars got parked on pit road after the race.
Yeah, for sure. My reaction was the exact same. I was, that's not good at all. But, Chase Elliott would gain a bunch of spots and he would pass Bowman for third as Bell would clear for second. But while this is going on, SVG, he would pull away to an 11-second lead over Christopher Bell. And Prime wasn't even showing SVG, and I don't even blame him. I mean, the guy, I've never seen a lead this big at a road course, of this size. But, with that being said here, SVG would go on to win at lap 100 with a 16.5-second lead. And, while he was doing his burnouts, he would finish his burnout and he'd be standing on the car, and the guys in fourth and fifth would be passing him, not even finished with the race yet. So this would mark the largest margin of victory in any Cup Series race since Texas in 2009. So that just goes to show you how insane of a gap this was from SVG to Christopher Bell, and hell of a job from SVG to just dominate this race. And I absolutely love to see it.
For sure. A lot of people were comparing this to almost look like the F1 race that usually does run here, with SVG winning by almost 17 seconds. It's very Max Verstappen-like, who SVG did have talks with prior to the race to figure out if a race is going to be, rain or shine and go back and forth, the track's going to change. How do you race that? So SVG really showing his inner Max Verstappen here and running a phenomenal is an understatement race here in Mexico City. But it does bring us to the point that we touched on just a few minutes ago, and it's the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Carson Hocevar debacle after this race. Stenhouse would get out of his car, and he would not even give Hocevar a chance to even unhook his helmet hose. Stenhouse would go right in the window, throw Hocevar's visor up, and really hand it to him. I'll let you quote it if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact quote here, but I mean, it almost looked like he was like putting his hand in and choking Carson Hocevar, which I know didn't happen, but that's just what it looked like from watching it at home. But he basically said, I'll see you once we get back to the States, and I'll see you once we get to Pocono. So, I don't know. I mean, if I'm Carson Hocevar, I don't even know what I'm doing. I would just opt out of the Pocono race if I could at this point. But to make it even worse, Hocevar would say some questionable things about the country of Mexico and Mexico City race, and he would get fined $50,000 from Spire after he said those things on the Twitch stream. So I mean, the weekend could just not get any worse for this kid. But I don't mean to laugh or anything, but I mean, I cannot imagine what this kid is thinking about going into Pocono in less than a week here.
Really, this whole weekend, and you ought to think Wednesday from when he said his things on his Twitch stream about Mexico City to the end of the race Sunday afternoon. It's just all had to mix together like a bad dream for Carson Hocevar, and as we go to Pocono with it being our home track, and we know Carson Hocevar is one of the most personable drivers. He's out walking around, you can take pictures with him, talk to him, he's signing autographs, he's everywhere pretty much, walking throughout the paddock, wherever. Well, I don't think we're going to see him a whole lot this year.
Yeah, I agree.
As Stenhouse told him that if the two of them see each other, there might be an altercation before the race even starts. So it'll definitely be something to watch out for, and we will be there. So if we would happen to catch Ricky or Carson before the race, we will try to get a little behind the scenes for you guys. So I'm going to plug here our YouTube, which we could see one of these shorts go up on, or even our Instagram as well at Upside Down Thoughts. You can find us on both, and on Instagram we have a link tree hooked up where you can find all of our other socials as well, such as X, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. So go check them out.
Yeah, for sure. Great plug there. Just one last thing before we get into the finishing order. And I guess I can just do this while we're in the finishing order, because the guy I'm going to mention is that Shane Van Gisbergen. Saw a lot of controversy on social media, as I like to go on some platforms and see what everyone has their thoughts to say on the race, as Reddit or Instagram or Twitter, whatever it is. I saw a lot of people, bashing SVG and complaining that he's locked into the playoffs now, and what does that mean for my favorite driver who was on the bubble or who was in the playoffs, but now he's, pushed back an extra spot because, he's now locked in and he was, like 33rd in points. And I just want to say this, guys, don't bash on SVG. Don't hate on Trackhouse. This is the name of the game, and every team knows the rules going into the race and the season. Everyone knows that, a win gets you into the playoffs, no matter what position you're in, no matter where you are in the standings. And, in an era of NASCAR where wins are so important and stage points are so important, and, just points in a whole are so important. SVG, he did what he had to do. So I have no issue with it. Anyone who doesn't understand that, it's really not my problem. So you got to look at it from a different view. And, I wish nothing but the best for SVG in his Cup career. I understand winning your in is controversial, but if you don't get the points I made, like I said, there's nothing I can do. It's not our problem, guys. You got to just deal with it, and stop bashing on the playoff system, because it's getting real old at this point.
Yeah, and everyone's hating on SVG. Well, I'm going to defend SVG as well. SVG did nothing wrong by winning this race and locking himself into the playoffs. This is the law of the land. Everybody knows the rules. This is, NASCAR has a lot of questioning on their rule book, and there are some things that are very up in the air that we've discussed on previous podcasts. A prime example going back earlier this year with the Elliott pit road penalty at Homestead Miami Speedway. That was a big one, but this is something that's very clear cut by NASCAR, and they say that if you win a race, you are locked into the playoffs if less than 16 drivers win, or 16. So it's really tough to be one of those people that's going to hate on SVG and say you don't deserve to be in the playoffs, because these guys that are outside the bubble, they know the rules, and I don't mean to be harsh, but I don't see them winning races.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. You summed it up perfectly. And I just want to challenge anyone listening to this podcast. If you guys don't like winning you're in, or you don't like the playoff system, type in the comments below what your alternative would be. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, and we'll, if we get multiple, we'll review them in the next Pocono podcast. Because you can talk the talk, but I don't see a lot of people coming up with a new playoff system. They have a lot of big mouths on the internet, but they're not really doing anything about it to make improvements and help out NASCAR. So love our points there. Shout out to SVG as we're getting to the final results. Unbelievable. Had the fastest lap, led 60 laps of the 100, gets the win, gets 50 points, locks himself in the playoffs for Trackhouse. Just unbelievable stuff. And Christopher Bell as well, running in the top 5 all day with Alex Bowman as well, and Chase Elliott, 200 guys. Amazing points day for Michael McDowell, who I want to keep touch on. My pick to win. A day where 45 points was needed, and he went out there and got the job done. I know it's not a win, but it definitely helps out in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just going to tap on a few other great finishes here. We see Chase Elliott, who worked his way up to 3rd. Bowman starting 29th, finishing 4th. McDowell able to maintain his track position from the start of the race, finishing 5th. Nemechek in 6th, after starting 32nd, a great finish for him. And Custer able to maintain 8th after starting 26th. And I'm going to mention one more name here that we love to talk about right now. He's another hot name, Chase Briscoe, finishing 7th after his penalty. So a great way to redeem himself there.
Yeah, and, just want to go down a little bit further. We see Chris Buescher get a top 10, so another good points day for him as he needs it. And we see Bubba Wallace in 12th, one of his best road course finishes here. AJ Allmendinger in 13th, not the day you're looking for when you're a road course ringer. You want to go out there and try to contend for a win, but he just didn't have it in that speed in that car. But
he also was calling back from a wreck, earlier. He was involved in that Kyle Busch wreck. I don't mean to cut you off, but it wasn't just an overall speed problem for Allmendinger throughout the day. It was that he did have a little bit of damage, making it a little harder on himself. So I will definitely be one to give him credit here. And to be able to salvage a 13th place finish with damage is a very good job for him.
Yeah, but moving on, we see Ryan Preece, who had those pit road problems, and he would salvage 15th. So he did the best he could with the penalty that he had. Daniel Suarez, the hometown kid, 19th. Just not the day you're looking for. Won the Xfinity race, so that's something you can take away from it. But you'd like to have a little bit better day, as he is very good at road courses too.
Yeah, and continuing to move even further down the starting lineup, the finishing lineup, we see Ryan Truex, who finished 23rd. For a guy that was around 3 times this race, it's another great spot to finish. And Stenhouse, after being spun out, running 15th, bringing it home 27th. That's a tough day there. And looking a little further down the starting list, or the finishing list, it's the second time I've done that now. We see Carson Hocevar, we mentioned his multiple incidents in his run-in again with Stenhouse, 34th. Just a bad weekend overall. And this is my favorite part, I think, of this finishing order. It's the guy that finished 36th. It's Kyle Larson. And normally, if you finish 36th, you would only get 1 point, but he got 2 points. And that was because he had the Xfinity fastest lap. And this is really interesting. I'm going to kind of go over what Steve Letart's opinion was. He's a NASCAR analyst for Prime right now. And he said that he does not agree with Kyle Larson being able to run the fastest lap of this race, even though he does, or getting credit for it at least, because Kyle Larson was 36 laps down when he ran the fastest lap. His team would take his car behind the garage after being involved with the Kyle Busch crash, would completely fix it and put him out for only a few laps to run a hot lap, and then bringing him back off track.
Yeah, I'm not really understanding where Steve Letart's coming from. I mean, he got the fastest lap. It's kind of like the only rule for this thing is if you get the fastest lap, you get an extra point. So I may be missing something here, but with the damaged vehicle policy being you can take it behind the garage, you have limited time. He's just following the rules. I know he's 36 laps down, but he wasn't DNF'd, so I have no problem with it, really.
Yeah, it's really just interesting to see, how this team managed to persevere. It's a great job by them, and it's very similar to the SVG thing, winning the race and being in the playoffs. It's law of the land. Everyone knows the rules. It's another thing that's clear cut. NASCAR says whoever gets the fastest lap of the race or runs the fastest lap of the race, they get 1 extra point. So it's not a surprise to anyone, but Steve Letarte, he's used to be a crew chief. He's used to little older NASCAR rules. So I think that's one of NASCAR's biggest problems with some fans and a lot of people involved with the sport, that these older guys that are involved with the sport just are, I don't mean to kind of tear on them, but a lot of them are really having trouble adapting, kind of to the new era and to the new rules. And it's something that I hope they can really kind of, looking into the future, kind of settle down and say, hey, we're here now. It's not going to change. You kind of either got to learn to like it, or, NASCAR's not going to go out of their way to change it just for you.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think a lot of the people that are complaining about the playoff system are a little bit older, older fans of NASCAR. But, that's pretty much it I got for the finishing order. I do want to have one little thing here. I mentioned you guys commenting below for, what you want to see in the playoff change or a new format. If you guys don't like it, I'll just throw mine out there to challenge you guys to say one. I just was thinking of another playoff format the other day that could kind of be interesting. Let's say you take away winning you're in. I would say with the points, you get 40 points for a win. Change that to 80. For make it 5 playoff points for a stage win, and make it 10 playoff points for a race win. Make these points more valuable. You get these finish fastest lap. Make it 3 points instead of 1. Make stage points. You get a stage win. Make it 15 or 20, and just 19, 18, and down the list. So, some of these drivers that have 4 or 5 wins on the season, they're still trying to get the most playoff points, because I kind of feel like playoff points are almost too shallow to work with. You see Bell or Larson, who have a lot of wins on the season, they're only having just over 20 playoff points. I feel like they should be a little bit more, but that I don't know how that would work out at all. That's just my alternative, but I do love winning you're in. I think it brings that Game 7, fourth quarter, third period mentality. And what would you do for a win? That's always the headlines. So I love it. I have no problem with it, but if there were to change it, that would be my alternative. So I challenge you guys, come up with an alternative, especially if you're bashing on it. You gotta put your money where your mouth is. So I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to hear your point of view on it and kind of your way of how you would change it. I look at your way of how you say it would push the issue more and make it a bigger want to win stages. NASCAR introduced stage racing only a few years ago at this point. Well, I should say 9 years ago now at this point, as it was 2016, I believe. But it would definitely push the issue, and I think it would force drivers to race harder earlier in the race, producing better racing. So I really love your point of view on that.
Appreciate it. But hey, that's pretty much all I could say. You already plugged all the stuff. So last thing I want to say is Sunday, Saturday as well, be on the lookout for some exclusive content from Pocono, as we do have some garage passes and exclusive places that we can enter. But yeah, Sunday's going to be a lot of fun. So check out our Instagram, X, YouTube. You mentioned all that stuff already, so I'm just restating everything. But yeah, it's pretty much all we got. We're finally caught up with podcasts, guys. I know it only took us 6 months, but hey, we got very, very busy lives here. But hey, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this one. I cannot wait to see you guys for Sunday, and can't wait to have that Pocono podcast up for you guys, as we did already make our race picks to win. So have a great day, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.